What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Stochastic Fantasy Football YouTube channel. And today we're kicking off some best ball content ahead of the summer. And we're going to be talking about some stacks today, some late round stacks you should be interested in. But before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We are also brought to you today by Underdog Fantasy. They have a first match deposit bonus of up to $100 when you use the promo code Stochastic or you click the link in the video description below. You must be 18 years old. You must be over 21 in Massachusetts, 19 in Alabama. And if you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Otherwise, what's Underdog? They have a variety of contests. We'll be talking about best ball today. They have some of the biggest tournaments around the industry with millions of dollars up top, but they also have other contests, pick'em contests for people in non-legal betting states where you can win up to 20 times your money. Daily fantasy contests, large field GPPs with daily drafts. Best ball, of course, is already underway. Make sure you're checking that out. In playoff drafts for NBA, NHL, PGA majors, a lot of the major contests you're going to see across the industry. And again, get that $100. It's essentially entries into a lot of these drafts we'll be talking about, including the big one with millions of dollars up top. But as we get started here, today we'll be talking about late round stacks. So we want to be looking at stacks outside the top 100 picks. We're going to isolate the quarterbacks to identify those stacks and then talk about the ones we want to potentially target. For stacking purposes, this is just quarterback with a pass catcher, could be a running back. Largely, we're talking about receivers and tight ends. And quickly, why that's important. Basically, when your quarterback throws a touchdown, you're going to get points for the pass catcher and for the quarterback who threw it. That correlation can bring you to the top of these tournaments and something we want to be focusing on, especially in the larger tournaments. And we'll talk about some other interesting stacking pieces throughout. But as we dive in, we're going to kick this off with the Seattle Seahawks. And this stack is really interesting to me because you've got Geno Smith coming off the huge year, coming at an ADP of 114.2. So right away, Geno Smith is coming off the board at a very favorable price. Now, a lot of people are going to ask, was this a fluke with him last year? Certainly was a career best for Geno Smith, about a 70% completion percentage. He was just shy of that. That led the NFL. Average 7.5 yards per attempt. That was ninth. 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, touchdown rate of 5.2%. It's pretty high. It's in the top 10. And these were all career highs for Geno Smith. But honestly, it was really the first time he'd been given a true opportunity in the NFL since his sophomore season in a horrific season with the Jets. So while surprisingly, he did perform as well as he did, honestly, he hadn't really been given too much of a shot, at least with the pass catchers of this caliber. And that brings us to some of the stacking partners. Situation's honestly better than last year. We still have DK Metcalf. We still have Tyler Lockett. And they spent a first-round pick on Jackson Smith-Njigba coming out of Ohio State, highly touted slot receiver. Seattle does have a win total of 8.5, so Vegas is expecting this team to be reasonably good again this year. And as we get to the elite stacking options, one thing I like right away is you don't have to spend first-round draft capital or even second-round draft capital on any of these guys. You have DK Metcalf, 28.6. That's his ADP on Underdog. Then you have Lockett and Smith-Njigba coming off the board just shy of 60. So basically, you're looking at a late fifth-round ADP if they slide an ADP of a sixth round potentially here. And as far as these receivers go, I love Metcalf. I'll take him wherever I possibly can. But I really like Lockett this year. And if you look at yards per route run, a predictive stat from Pro Football Focus, Metcalf was at 1.93. Lockett was right behind him at 1.89. A lot of people have argued the career arc of Lockett and talked about decline. It would be a pretty substantial decline at this point in his career to see him drop well below that 1.89 mark. Of course, he's getting older. Decline is expected. But those people taking Jackson Smith-Njigba ahead of Lockett are betting on some pretty serious decline. For me, I do like Lockett here. He's a guy who plays in and out of the slot. Last year, his slot rate was 42%. So we have a lot of experience outside. And I bring that up because Jackson Smith-Njigba is expected to play the slot. Now, with that said, I'm doing multiple drafts here. When Jackson Smith-Njigba falls, I'm happy to take him. If these two come off at ADP, Lockett is my favorite, but when Smith and Jigba falls, definitely going to click that as well. This is a guy who outproduced Offensive Rookie of the Year Garrett Wilson as a sophomore at Ohio State, also outproduced Chris Olave. He held off the talented Marvin Harrison, but he does come with risks. He barely played last year, operates entirely out of the slot. Now, that's advantageous for fantasy, but there also needs to be a balance here. Seattle runs a ton of two tight end sets. Now, that could change this year. Smith and Jigba, first round draft pick, probably means a little less 12 personnel, but Noah Fant and Will Dissly haven't gone anywhere. Which brings me to the last player on this list. If you absolutely miss on Metcalf, Smith and Jigba, and Lockett, and you're planning on using a Seattle stack, you can backdoor this with Noah Fant. Or if you're playing the larger tournaments, you can add Noah Fant on as a very late pick coming off the board outside the top 200 to complete a double stack with the Seahawks here, which is something I do like. As far as playoffs go, if you're playing the larger tournaments with hundreds of thousands of entries, you need to be considering who the team does draw in the playoffs. For Seattle, it's decent. They've got the Steelers in week 17. Luckily, that game is at home. To get there, they play the Titans and they play Philly. Philly should be somewhat of a shootout. That is a home game for Seattle as well. So while this isn't the most ideal playoff schedule, it's still not bad. And the Steelers in week 17 at home is not something we are too worried about here. Second late round stack we are looking at Pittsburgh. And again, these are late round stacks for a reason. If you can get Joe Burrow and stack him with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, you want to do that. But if you're looking at maybe a second stack or something just late in general, the Steelers are also very interesting here. We're basically entering year 2 of the Kenny Pickett era. Coaching staff is largely intact here. Decent win total on Pittsburgh, so we're not expecting this team to be bottom of the barrel or anything like that. And now you have Kenny Pickett coming off the board with an ADP of 169.7 on Underdog. This is extremely late. You can get Kenny Pickett in the 15th round sometimes, generally coming off the board in the 14th. Last year, his efficiency stats were a little below average, but again, rookie season. He completed 63% of his passes for 6.2 yards per attempt, but he has one stat here that is due for some serious positive regression. 1.8% touchdown rate. We just talked about Geno Smith at 5.2%. He was a little above average. 1.8 was one of the worst marks in the league. And basically, if you start 17 games in the NFL, you rarely see touchdown rates this low. So for Pickett here, we're looking at some serious positive touchdown regression. He has decent playmakers around him. Pittsburgh continues to invest in their wide receivers. We'll get to that in a second. And Pickett actually has some decent mobility. He's not Jalen Hurts, but he has mobility sort of on the same realm as Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes. We saw that in his college days. That's decent for fantasy, and it definitely gives you a reasonable floor. As for his pass catchers, we have proven commodity Deontay Johnson in the slot, 882 yards last year. He went for over 1,000 the year prior. That's something we should certainly like here. He's a guy coming off the board outside the top 60. And again, this stack is one you can add pieces on really late. You have second-year player George Pickens coming off the board at 74.7, same range as Deontay. But then they added Allen Robinson, and his ADP is extremely low, outside the top 200. If you miss on either of those guys, he can be added on pretty quickly. And Robinson's battled injuries. He's been somewhat ineffective recently, but he is an upgrade for this offense as wide receiver 3. One thing that's different here compared to Seattle is this stack kind of works backwards. With Seattle, if I'm drafting Metcalf, Lockett, or JSN, I'm kind of prioritizing getting Geno Smith. But with this one, Kenny Pickett's a guy I'm generally drafting if one of these elite pass catchers on the Steelers falls. For example, if Deontay Johnson goes at pick 75, I know I can get Kenny Pickett pretty late here, and then maybe I take Kenny Pickett a round ahead of ADP. So overall, it's a very easy stack to acquire here. And you also have pass catchers at every point in the draft. We mentioned the guys in the top 6 rounds, Johnson and Pickens. We have mid-round pick Pat Freiermuth, proven touchdown score, which is extremely important for these tournaments, especially at the tight end position, which is largely driven by touchdowns. And then you add on an easy double stack really late with Allen Robinson. This is a stack that's easily acquirable at a cheap price, and you can add it on as a second stack in your drafts. As far as playoffs, this is another one that's a little bit up and down. Pittsburgh does draw Indianapolis in week 15. Dome game is pretty good here. They play Cincinnati in week 16, divisional game outside in Pittsburgh. but this is one that could be a shootout. Cincinnati has a high-powered offense on the other side. Then they close against Seattle. We mentioned this game already in the previous stack. It's actually a pretty good game. The projected over-under here does maybe favor a backdoor shootout for that final game of the year in Week 17, which we are always trying to correlate in order to win the big tournaments in these drafts. But let's get to our final one, the greasiest stack of all. We're going to talk Houston Texans, ADPs, all outside the top 100. These are the kind of stacks I'm looking for in the massive tournaments on Underdog. Starting with the quarterback, we have rookie CJ Stroud. He comes off the board in round 16, but he's a rookie. And once you get to these late round guys, you can really see some serious sliding for these players. I've gotten Stroud outside the top 200 in a couple drafts. Pretty ridiculous here for a starting quarterback in the NFL with the pedigree he has. They also bring in Bobby Slowick as the offensive coordinator. This was a guy that worked with a lot of quarterbacks in San Francisco. We're talking Brock Purdy, some players that did not generally have a lot of draft capital. Now he actually gets a really talented player in CJ Stroud. Stroud was one of the most prolific passers in Ohio State history. He also has sneaky rushing upside that wasn't always displayed there. We did see it in the Georgia game, and Ohio State doesn't generally run the quarterback as much as some other teams. Check Justin Fields' stats from his time at Ohio State. But right away, Stroud stands out as a really late round pick. He's also incredibly easy to stack as far as ADPs. The problem is deciphering the pecking order here. Nico Collins, the presumed wide receiver 1, pick 132.5. This guy's coming off the board outside of the 10th round. Really easy to get. Went over 400 yards, only played 10 games last year. Now receives a quarterback upgrade compared to what he played with Davis Mills last year. We love that. From there, it's pretty dicey. John Mechie, coming back from the cancer diagnosis, fully cleared now, second highest ADP of 175.6. I think he's fine. A little worried about him starting slow just based on the treatment he had to undergo last year. But if you're not interested in him, Robert Woods is there outside the top 200. They also have a couple really interesting flyers that aren't on the screen, but Tank Dell, rookie out of Houston, he was a guy that was allegedly handpicked by Stroud, tiny slot receiver, but he's a player that could win the slot job here and maybe emerge late as the season goes on. Rookies, generally they start a little bit slower, and then as they get acclimated to the NFL and the NFL playbooks of their various offenses, they can be high performers for you late in the year, which is important in these top-heavy tournaments. But most interesting of all is tight end Dalton Schultz, 577 yards last year. He had over 800 in 2021, but again, he was with Dallas. Way more target competition. He could theoretically be the number one pass catcher in this team. He's also a double-digit round pick, ADP of 138.7 for Dalton Schultz. He's another stacking option that's really easy to get here. And again, when Nico Collins falls, when Dalton Schultz falls, these guys fall a lot. Stroud is just a really easy guy to tack on at the end of your drafts. Or maybe you missed your stack. Say you went with an elite Jalen Hurts who has elite stacking options like Devontae Smith. They come off the board high. There's a chance you miss those players. You can backdoor your way into a stack here with the Texans extremely cheap, which is one thing I do love about this Texans stack. Finally, they have a good playoff schedule. This is one that's really grading out well in our metrics on the back end at Stochastic. They play the Titans twice in week 15 and week 17. The Titans have a horrific defense. We'll see how their offense looks here. But if they end up being a little better than expected, you've got double correlation, week 15 and week 17. If those games exceed expectation, you could be looking at some elite correlation options there. And they also get Cleveland as their final game in the playoffs. So this is a good playoff schedule for Houston, especially because you play one opponent twice. One thing that we really like here. But those are the three stacks we'll talk about today. Late round stacks. Check out all of our content over at Stochastic. We're going to have a ton throughout the summer, including more stacks, positional value, ranking shows, everything you can name. And then check out Underdog. Again, you've got a $100 match deposit bonus there. You can get in some of these drafts essentially for free with that deposit bonus. You're at least going to double your money. So make sure to check out Underdog Fantasy. They're doing great things over there. Until next time, I'm Matt Gajewski. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you again soon.